How did Andor go from a common thief to igniting the fire of rebellion? Prepare to jump into hyperspace. This is the entire story of Andor. It's clear from the get-go that this is not your father's Star Wars. Cassian Andor was introduced to audiences in 2014's Rogue One, which takes place after the series Andor, continuing the franchise's long-standing tradition of non-chronological releases. He's a scoundrel like Han Solo, except there's no question that he'd be the guy who always shoots first. The project has such a unique tone because most of it comes from one guy, Tony Gilroy. Gilroy previously wrote adult thrillers like Michael Clayton and the Bourne series. He authored the script to Rogue One, oversaw significant reshoots, and ran the entire Andor TV series. The Andor saga has a much grittier aesthetic and military-based story, instead of the sci-fi action that comes with following Jedi. Andor plays as a prestige TV version of Star Wars, complete with Emmy Award nominations. Set 5 years before the end of A New Hope, the series is a political thriller that traces the journey of Cassian Andor's gradual embrace of the rebellion's ideology. Andor doesn't feel like it's for kids at all, with heroes committing violent acts and many portrayals of governments exploiting its people. Performances like Diego Luna as Andor or Stellan Skarsgård as Luthen are grounded in a way we haven't seen from the franchise before. Alright, now that you're briefed, we're sending you behind enemy lines. Let's get into it. Episode 1, Kassa, begins on Morlana 1, an industrial planet. A shadowy figure is searched and enters a bar into the light. This is Cassian Andor, and we're not just in any old bar. Shockingly, it's explicitly stated to be a brothel, almost as if the show is announcing immediately that it is much darker than other Star Wars projects. Cassian asks around for his sister, and he's harassed by 2 corpos, the planet's corporation security guards. The madam knows nothing of his sister, and Cassian is on his way when he gets stopped by the corpos, and things escalate quickly. Cassian ends up killing both men and fleeing the planet. On Cassian's current home planet, Ferrix, we follow a droid. No, this isn't a sequel to Wally. It's Cassian's family droid B2EMO, or B for short. Cassian convinces the droid to hide the fact that he came through. Quick detour into a flashback. A younger Cassian, then known as Kassa, and his sister Akari live in a tribe on planet Kenari. In the present, Cassian invents cover stories for his friend Brasso, in case anyone comes asking. Back on Morlana 1, the chief of security decides to cover up the killings to make his job easier, but his deputy, Cyril Karn, who brought the case to his attention, isn't happy with this decision. It's the first glimpse of many we'll get into Imperial middle management. Over with Cassian, he visits another friend who will soon be a major player in the series, Bix.
The one who buys your secret friend. How fast can you reach him?
He wants her to connect with a black market seller so he can get cash from a piece of Imperial navigation tech. She's skeptical, but agrees. It's clear these two have a bit of a history. In another flashback, we see more of life on Kenari. Their culture is much more nature-based than the rough, metallic cities we've seen so far. Elsewhere, Cyril tracks Cassian's ship. Cassian gets caught swapping chip logs on a ship by Pegla, a man employed at the scrapyard. Cassian wants to use his ship, but Pegla is freaked out by Cassian and refuses to help him. In the flashback, Cassian goes to investigate a crashed ship and leaves his sister behind. Episode 2, That Would Be Me, continues the flashback. The young Cassian emerges from the forest to make a shocking discovery. Even in this secluded planet, they're not safe from the Empire's reach. In the present, Bix's boyfriend Tim does not like Bix's involvement with Cassian and notices a warrant for Andor's arrest. Cassian visits his adoptive mother, Marva. She gets word of the warrant and that it mentions he was born in Kenari, which they've always tried to hide. Just then, B announces that Bix is contacting Cassian. Cassian meets Bix and comes clean as to why he's on the run. Cassian wants to evacuate ASAP, but she tells him the buyer is coming tomorrow, and it's too late to call him off. Tim tips off the corpos on Cassian's location, and Cyril finds his suspect. Cyril prepares with Linus Musk, a Primor officer who intends to wield the full might of power. Back in the flashback, Kassa at this point, finds a crashed ship and approaches with caution. Next, a mysterious spacecraft lands on Ferrix. This is Luthen Rael, easily one of the show's most important characters, and is absolutely integral to the birth of the rebellion. He surveys Bix's salvage yard from afar. Back with Marva, she finds a staff similar to what Cassian had when he was a child, which leads us to another flashback. At the crash site, it appears the entire crew is dead. Keyword here is appears. The tribe takes down the survivors, but their leader died in the battle. Kassa chooses to stay on the ship instead of returning with his group. Andor approaches a transporter who's looking up Kenari. He says it was abandoned after a mining disaster and is now considered toxic. Wow, wonder how Cassian got off. He haggles down the price of transportation and says he'll be back with the credits in an hour. Next, a team of Primor officers, including Cyril and Linus, head to Ferrix. Luthen arrives by bus in the city as well. All the main players are on Ferrix. Let's see how this goes down. Episode 3, Reckoning, has the story truly taking flight. We start with Kassa entering the crashed craft. He's taken aback by the high-tech and lashes out. In the present, Luthen rendezvous with Bix. She brings him to Cassian. Little do they know, the threat of Primor is closer than they think. Back in the past, Kassa isn't alone on the ship. Marva and Andor's adopted father, Clem, searches it to salvage parts. She encounters Kassa in a rage, breaking everything and knocks him out. They decide to transport him somewhere safe. Next, the Corpos knock on Marva's door, looking for Cassian. They interrogate B, who manages to stonewall them, but cover is blown when Cassian radios the droid. Oops, Cassian meets with Luthen and tries to get a good price, but Luthen is more interested in how Cassian got the device. Cassian explains that because of his perceived low status, he can easily slip past others' defenses. Luthen alludes to Clem's public execution, and Cassian asks who he is.
How do you know about me?
Luthen has bigger ideas for Cassian's skills, but he can't get into detail. They need to run. On the streets of Ferrix, the commoners bang pots and pans to scare off the patrolling Primor officers, but it's not effective. The Corpos surround the building where Luthen and Cassian talk. They also stop Bix on the street. Luthen seemed to anticipate the potential for conflict and had preset charges for an escape route. There's an intense blaster battle, and the new duo makes it out just in time. Tim encounters Bix in the process of being apprehended and steps in to save the day. Wow, that's brutal. The Corpos get in position to head up Cassian. But Andor's stealth skills get him the upper hand. He interrogates Cyril, then knocks him out. Cyril is discovered and freed just as a land speeder rushes through the city. This must be Cassian. Nope. Cassian and Luthen race by on a speeder bike moments later. Damn, he sure is sneaky. Cassian and Luthen's escape is intercut with Marva remembering bringing Kassa home all those years ago. In both the past and present, Cassian Andor is on a ride to realize his destiny. Episode 4, Aldhani, opens with Cassian on board a ship in hyperspace headed to planet Aldhani. Luthen says he can either drop him off or turn him loose, or Cassian can join his fight against the Empire. Cassian is skeptical. He thinks it's better to stay alive than willingly put yourself in danger for an ideal. Luthen says he came to Ferrix for Cassian and not the contraband. Andor gives in and agrees to a robbery job for 200,000 credits. The target? Quarterly payroll for an Imperial sector. Next, we head over to Coruscant, which, as you may remember from the prequel trilogy, is the capital of the galaxy. At the Imperial Security Bureau, or ISB, a group of Imperial officers led by Major Partagas discuss the necessity of the Empire's heightened surveillance. He learns from an officer named Blevins about what went down on Ferrix. On Aldhani, Cassian chooses the name Clem as his alias. Luthen gives Cassian a Sky Kyber pendant, which contains a Kyber crystal, a key component needed to make a lightsaber. Luthen says he wants it back when the job is over. Luthen meets with Vel, Luthen's contact for the job, who will become hugely influential to the rebellion. Luthen pitches her on Andor's skills, but she's hesitant to take on a new person so close to the execution. He wins her over by saying Cassian is disposable and ultimately it's her mission. Back on Coruscant, Cyril and other Corpos report to Blevin. He chews them out and says their system is now under total Imperial authority. Back on Aldhani, Kel instructs Cassian to never bring up Luthen to the others. Their conversation gets interrupted. That was close. Another ship arrives on Coruscant carrying Luthen. He glows up with a wig, new threads, and even a little bling. What is going on here? Later, Miro, one of the officers present in the meeting with Partagas earlier, and a central antagonist of the series, confronts Blevin for refusing to turn over the file on Ferrix. She claims she has jurisdiction due to her oversight of the stolen navigation device. Blevin denies her request. Back on Aldhani, we meet the other rebels involved in the heist. Chinta, Taramin, Karis, and Arvel. They seem highly suspicious of Cassian, but Vel vouches for him. He gets treated for a blaster burn by Chinta. Taramin and Arvel do not trust Cassian at all. But Karis thinks Cassian believes in the cause, and that's all that matters. Over on Coruscant, Senator Mon Mothma, who you might remember from Return of the Jedi as the eventual leader of the rebellion, arrives at a meeting with Luthen.
What a pleasure to see you.
You as well, Luthen. Sorry to be so late.
For now, she is seeking antiques, and Luthen just happens to be one of the finest dealers of artifacts. Nope, that's just a cover. Mon Mothma is secretly funding Luthen's operations, and as soon as they're out of earshot, they get into it. She confides it's getting harder to move the money. Their meeting ends with her telling him she met someone who could assist their cause. The rebels on Aldhani bicker as Lieutenant Ghorman, an Imperial informant, arrives. He does not trust Clem at all. Next comes a glimpse into Mon Mothma's home life. Her husband, Piran Firtha, invited guests she did not approve of to a dinner party because they made political decisions to gut off Ghorman. Shipping lanes, which would result in starvation. Firtha clearly doesn't share her progressive views. Back on Aldhani, the crew plans their heist. They'll be going against TIE fighters. Have fun with that.
That's why they only keep a 40-man regiment in the garrison.
The team plans to execute their plan while the planet is distracted by an annual celestial event that mimics a meteor shower called the Eye of Aldhani. They get ready. Miro and Blevin bring their conflict to Partagas. Miro believes Gear is targeted systematically by an organized rebellion. Partagas thinks she doesn't have enough evidence and she needs to focus more on her immediate duties. Alright, Episode 4. The Axe for Gets opens with Cyril at his mother's house and she's serving cereal with some of that famous Star Wars blue milk. It always looks so good. She's depressed about how Fennec went down and doesn't have any job prospects. She says she'll put in a word with his Uncle Haro to hook something up. Elsewhere, Cassian wakes up to discover his weapons are missing. Turns out Arvel searched him on behalf of Vel. Arvel tries to get Cassian to open up about his past, but he fabricates a story. Arvel is skeptical of his background but doesn't question it too much. Over on Coruscant, Mon Mothma has breakfast with her husband and daughter Leda, who, in total bratty kid style, complains about having to be associated with her mother. Mon Mothma walks out. Next, Cassian gets to know Karis a bit better. He has tons of ideas about how to live outside of the Imperial system and even wrote a manifesto. Arvel finds Karis overly idealistic. He asks Andor his thoughts, but Cassian still doesn't give an inch. Cassian meets with Taramyn and quickly realizes his crew has no idea how to transport the loot. He walks them through how they can determine the weight from the ship itself. He insists he needs to pilot it, and Taramyn has no choice but to agree. Cassian gets his cover story, an Imperial private being transferred to the base. Back on Ferrix, Telvin commandeers a hotel to set up Imperial occupying headquarters. Cassian and the team train. He makes a crucial observation that Arvel is left-handed and should switch sides. His observational skills are clearly going to come in handy. Just then comes trouble. Luckily, the TIE fighters merely observe them and fly back to their base. Later, Cassian suits up as an Imperial officer. Elsewhere, Supervisor Miros searches Imperial ledgers for the missing object that she thinks were taken by the rebels. She's losing faith, but the attendant Hart thinks she's onto something and pledges to help her look. The night before the heist, Vel makes a toast by the fire.
To the rebellion.
To the rebellion.
The next day, they head for the base, dressed as pilgrims. On the way, Cassian asks Vel how they can be sure Ghorman is faithful. She explains he fell in love with a local and lost out on his promotion, causing dissatisfaction with the Empire. At the same time, Ghorman preps around the base for the rebels. Arvel finally makes a move on Cassian.
Don't move.
He thinks Cassian's Kyber crystal pendant is evident that he is lying about his past. Cassian eventually tells them straight up he's only there for the money. The rebels lose a lot of respect for him. The team lights a signal fire, and Ghorman sees it from afar. Game on. Arvin tells Cassian his brother was killed by the Empire, and that motivated him to join the fight. These two men seem to have found common enough ground. Vel leaves and puts Tamarin in charge of the mission. Back with Luthen, he waits for an update. He confides to his assistant Marky that recruiting Andor may have been a mistake. We shall see in the next episode. Episode 5, The Eye, kicks off with Karis waxing philosophical again. Cassian expresses his bitterness to the world. He does not see a point in trying to make it better. Next, we get another window into Imperial management. Commandant Biaz briefs other officers on techniques to manipulate the Dani people from making their pilgrimage to watch the meteor shower. Ghorman confirms only 60 will be able to attend next year. Biaz says this will be the last year of their pilgrimage, before their secret valley will be utilized exclusively by the military. Cassian's team contacts Vel via radio and proceeds towards the base. Arvel reveals to Cassian that Tamarin was a stormtrooper before joining the rebellion. The team changes from their pilgrim disguises into Imperial uniforms. Ghorman sets Cassian and the team up with a vital detail. The commandant is in for a surprise. Simultaneously, Vel and Chinta begin their secret infiltration. The commandant gets to meet his new bodyguards, and they head to the valley together. Once they return to the base, the rebels apprehend Bihaz and his family. The colonel tries to fight back, but it doesn't go so well. The team demands Bihaz take them to the payroll vault. Next, a communication blocker placed earlier by Vel blocks the Empire's comms. Cassian and the others progress further into the base. Outside, the ceremony continues. Vel manipulates Bihaz into using the tired and true method of threatening his family. They reach the vault and apprehend another group of officers. They make Bihaz unlock the vault as much as he has access to, but then have to blow the rest open. The rebels start looting the goods. At the same time, Chinta shuts down communications further, preventing backup. A soldier, suspicious of the comms error, stumbles on the operation and a blaster battle ensues. Ghorman and Amarin die in the battle. Andor gets the others on board just in time. Unfortunately, an unsecured package crushes Karras. But he is revived to give Cassian the coordinates to get out of there. Andor pilots the ship around multiple TIE units. Karras passes out again, and Vel does not want to detour for a doctor. Arvel pushes for it, and Cassian agrees. While Karras is being operated on, Arvel tries to recruit Cassian to betray the others. He wants to leave with the ship. Oh, and that story about his brother earlier? Totally a lie. Cassian does what he needs to. Cassian comes into the operating room. They lost Karras. Man, these guys are dropping like flies. Cassian asks Vel for a payout. The amount of credit he was promised. Then, he's gonna get the hell out. On the way out, she gives him Karras' manifesto. On the Imperial side, reps from all over the galaxy are summoned for an emergency meeting. Next, we get a look at the Galactic Senate. Mon Mothma introduces a bill to look into the Ghorman blockade. But most of the senators aren't even present. Not even Senator Jar Jar. The episode ends with Luthen receiving news of the heist's success and having a good laugh. Let's hope those vibes continue. Episode 7, Announcement, opens with another check-in on Cyril at his mom's house. She preps him for a big meeting with his hotshot uncle to see if he can work some nepotism magic. He sees news coverage of the rebels' attack. At the ISB meeting, Colonel Wolf Yularen briefs officers on the response to the attack. They're going to turn up the oppression by heavily taxing any planet that harbors rebels. Not only that, but his orders come from the big boss.
Will trigger permanent revocation of Imperial tolerance.
It's kind of hilarious to imagine this comically evil space wizard interacting with the realistic Imperial officers in the series. Anyways, Palpatine authorizes the ISB to have increased power and resources. Later, Miro confides to Hart, the attendant from the previous episode, that the Empire's approach is playing into the rebels' hands. On Coruscant, Mon Mothma meets Luthen under the pretense of an antique visit to ask him if he was behind the Aldhani heist. He doesn't full-on admit it, but she knows. Mon Mothma thinks his actions are too intense when she was merely trying to build a network. He explains that the network is what will bring down the Empire. She is concerned for the people who will suffer, but Luthen explains the Empire's overreaction is part of the plan. She slips back into antique shopper mode and leaves. At the same time, Cyril gets set up with a boring desk job at the Bureau of Standards. We'll check back in on him later. Back at the ISB headquarters, Miro continues her search for missing parts and requests a confidential report. Over on Aldhani, Chinta has a terrifying view.
You had doubts about schemes, one less thing to worry about.
On Coruscant, Vel meets with Marky, Luthen's assistant. Vel and Marky update each other. Marky also tells Vel that Cassian Andor is a loose end, implying he needs to die. Back on Ferrix, Cassian comes home to Marva. She warns him to leave, as the Empire has seized control of Ferrix since the prior events. Cassian tries to convince her to leave for a safer place with him. He plans on checking in with Bix and leaving in the morning. Elsewhere in Coruscant, Mon Mothma meets with Tay Kolma, a banker and longtime friend. She introduces her to Leda, who's super rude. Teenagers. She tells Kolma she intends to use the Senate to resist Imperial oppression. He is hesitant to get involved with politics. She asks for help raising money for a foundation, but we know it's the rebellion. As her husband approaches, they change the subject. Cassian visits Bix. It's not a happy reunion. She blames him for the destruction on Ferrix and the death of Tim. He asks her about the buyer, Luthen, but she has no idea. He then gives her credits to pay off his debts to others on Ferrix. Next, he goes back to Marva's. She says she is staying on Ferrix for the rebellion. He thinks she's insane, but a painful memory of her husband's execution drives her.
Take the long way around so I don't have to think about Clem hanging there.
She tells Cassian she was inspired by the assault on Aldhani, having no idea he was a participant. He thinks rebelling is foolish when you can merely hide. He makes to depart when Marva reveals his sister likely died on Canary. And it's time for Cassian to stop searching for her. He says he'll be back one day, but it seems unlikely. Very heavy stuff. Next, more internal ISB politics. Blevin thinks Miro violated the chain of command by obtaining the crime reports. Miro presents her data as evidence of rebellion. Partagas questions her methods but says he will look into her claims. In private, he tells her he's impressed and to watch out. Next on Niamos, a totally chill beach getaway. Cassian, now living under the name Keith, stays with a woman who asks him to buy drugs. On the street, a shore trooper begins questioning him for no reason. A group runs past them, and Cassian gets lumped in with them by the officer. This is the first look we get at a KX security droid. They're seriously terrifying. Cassian's case, which is entirely drummed up charges, quickly gets processed and he's sentenced to 6 years in jail. Episode 8, Narkina 5, begins one of the most memorable and intense arcs on the show. Cassian gets sent to Narkina 5, a prison planet. He's shackled as the ship takes off. Wow, even with all the super illegal stuff he did in the first few episodes, it's crazy to see him go down for just existing. That's fascism for you. Zero continues his desk job, whose interior design recalls some of the dystopian environments from George Lucas's debut feature THX 1138. Miro questions him on why he's going through old records. He says he's investigating Andor. Miro decides to hand him Blevin's report on Ferrix to see if what was taken down actually happened. Cassian arrives at Narkina, which is a little like a futuristic Alcatraz. It's totally intimidating. Back with ISB, Miro presents the stolen navigation device that Andor took. She tells other officers about him, and his murders of 2 corpos from the pilot. She says he was transferring the device to a buyer whom they have codenamed as Axis, and who we know as Luthen. Miro, now with her higher-ups' backing, intends to search Ferrix for Andor, as part of the wider goal of finding the rebel leader, Axis. Cassian arrives at the jail, or as the Imperials call it, work camp. They maintain control by shocking the floor, which the warden demonstrates in a brutal display. Later, Cyril tells Miro about omissions in the report. He heard Luthen's voice as well. He offers to help Miro find Andor, but she doesn't take him on. Cassian is led to the factory floor. He meets the unit's manager.
Unit manager. The 49 men in this room answer to me.
This is one of the most integral and legendary characters, played by the one and only Andy Serkis, aka Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Kino lays down the law immediately and says his sentence is almost complete. He expects high productivity as they compete with the other floors. He's a total hard-ass. Cassian meets other prisoners on his floor and is off to work. On Coruscant, Mon Mothma meets with Kolma, who tells her the Empire's laws are hurting his bank. She has more weird interactions with her family too. It's clear almost everything in Mon's life is a front. In a lineup, Cassian catches one of the other prisoners communicating via sign language to another unit across from them. Back on Coruscant, Mon Mothma hears from multiple other senators who note the oppression of Palpatine's laws. Later, Cassian gets a walkthrough of his cell. He learns after the events on Aldhani, the prisoner's punishments have been increased. Over time, Cassian adjusts to his new life doing forced labor. On Ferrix, Bix meets with Marva, who has fallen ill. Even in her sickness, she commits small acts of rebellion. Across the street, Vel and Shinta unite, both still committed to the cause. Next, Bix visits a repair shop, sneaks to the back, and turns on a radio transmitter. We'll see where that goes. Turns out she was paging Marky, her only contact with Luthen, to ask for Cassian's location. Luthen wants to respond, but Maki convinces him to shut down the transmission for now. Later, he boards his ship for Segra Milo for reasons unknown. On Ferrix, the stormtroopers continue their iron grip on the planet. She's recognized by an officer and runs away. Meanwhile, Luthen meets with Saw Gerrera,
But tell me if it was.
leader of the ruthless rebellion faction the Partisans, and who you might recognize from the Clone Wars animated series, which you can watch our recap about next. Luthen tries to connect Saw with Anto Krieger, a man planning an attack on an Imperial power station, but Saw wants to work alone due to ideological differences. Luthen pressures him into giving Krieger a shot. Back on Ferrix, Bix is brought in for questioning by Miro, but we'll have to see how that plays out in the next episode. Episode 9, Nobody's Listening, picks up where we left off, Bix's interrogation. Miro threatens her with torture from the brutal Dr. Gorst if she doesn't start talking. She asks Bix about the black market buyer, who we know as Luthen, and Andor. Bix covers and says Andor doesn't know the buyer. Bix also uses the Shaggy defense, "It wasn't me," about her relationship with the buyer, but Miro knows from interrogating the salvage yard owner Pack that Bix is lying. Miro recalls that Bix tried to warn Andor when they escaped Ferrix. Bix won't say any more, and Miro hands her to Gorst. Simultaneously, Cassian continues his interrogation into prison life. When a prisoner with an injured hand needs to take a break, Cassian swaps shifts. Kino starts to take notice. Back on Ferrix, Bix is subjected to unique torture when Dr. Gorst plays the recordings of screams of alien species he's extinguished, which can cause people to be deeply traumatized. Her torture is horrific. Cassian, though seemingly a good prisoner, still has that rogue in him. He's interrupted by this pipe-cutting operation by the intercom announcing a new arrival. Cassian starts talking about escaping with Burnock, another prisoner. He uses the prisoner drop-off process to get the upper hand. Back with Bix, Miro asks her for information yet again, but she will not fold. Over on Coruscant, Mon Mothma tries to bring new legislation to limit the Empire's power, but the session devolves into a shouting match. Later, through sign language on the lineup, word spreads that over 100 prisoners on level 2 were executed. Kino shuts him up. Back on Coruscant, Mon Mothma meets her cousin, who's none other than our friend Vel. Mon Mothma tries to ask about her work with Luthen, but Vel won't get specific. Later on, in private, Mon Mothma tells Vel to take up a persona for cover as a spoiled rich girl. Later, Cassian asks Kino if he has ever considered escaping. Kino wants to keep his head down until his remaining 217 shifts are complete. Cassian says their treatment is abhorrent and they need to take action.
I think they care what we say. Nobody's listening. Nobody.
At the ISP headquarters, Miro presents her updated findings to Partagas. She was able to get a list of stolen gear from Bix. Partagas allows Miro to investigate if the heist on Aldhani is connected to the Ferrix incident. Miro also reveals the Imperials are watching Marva in case Cassian returns. In transit, the prisoners get more updates on level 2. The new prisoner claims that Zinska, the former day manager on Cassian's level, freed the prisoners, and over 100 men got electrocuted. Kino freaks and hits, who's telling the story, and Cassian has to stop him. Over with Cyril, he's becoming quietly obsessed. He visits Miro to thank her for his promotion. She still doesn't want to get involved with him, and Loki thinks he's being creepy. She tries to leave, and he grabs her arm. She threatens Cyril. Back with Mon Mothma, she meets again with the banker, Tay Kolma, who said authorities are beginning to get suspicious of the funds being withdrawn. He connects her with another banker, Davo Skoldon, who Mon Mothma says is a criminal. She's hesitant to meet with Davo due to his reputation. Later, with the ISB, Miro orders a rebel pilot whose ship is found with a missing Imperial device to be interrogated. She presents her findings. He reveals his faction's plans on raiding a power station at Spellhouse. To cover for his absence, Miro suggests bugging the ship, killing the pilot, and letting the ship drift so the rebels take it back. The Imperials will know of their location. Partagas backs her. Back on Narkina 5, Ulaf, the prisoner with the injured hand from the episode's beginning, can't take it anymore. A medic is summoned for him, and Roy tells the medic that Ulaf only has 40 shifts until freedom. The medic realizes Ulaf had a stroke. He begins to administer drugs to euthanize Ulaf instead. The medic tells Kino that a man released from level 4 ended up on level 2 the next day. And when word got out, 100 prisoners were killed. The frightening truth dawns on Andor and Kino. No one gets out of Narkina 5. Kino decides to start telling Cassian what he knows about the prison. Episode 10, One Way Out, has to be one of the most thrilling episodes. As Ulaf's body is carted out, Cassian tells Kino that prisoners significantly outnumber guards, and they need to escape tomorrow. Kino is still hesitant, but Cassian makes clear he's willing to die to try to escape. As they walk back to their cells, they tell another prisoner about the execution on level 2 and that no one will be released. Elsewhere, Miro gets word that the rebel faction led by Anto Krieger was taking place in the pilot's ship, setting up an opportunity for the Imperials to strike. Back in jail, it's the big day, and Kino rouses the other prisoners. They go about their shift like normal, but it's only a matter of time. Over on Ferrix, Marva is not doing well. Chinta keeps an eye on her as well. On Coruscant, Mon Mothma gives in and meets with Davo, who's actually pretty classy. He comes up with methods to help launder Mon Mothma's charitable foundation's funds, which she will funnel into the rebellion. The meeting takes a turn for the weird when Davo names his price. his son's betrothal to Monmouth's daughter, Ladra. She says she's out, but he can't tell that she doesn't mean that. At the antique shop, Luthen receives a contact for a mysterious meeting. Marky tells him it could be a trap, but Luthen is taking the risk. Cassian and the other inmates begin their plan. Cassian secretly cuts a water pipe, causing an alarm to sound. He takes his place with the others. Next, two prisoners pretend to fight, which creates a distraction, giving Andor a chance to strike. The prisoners start overtaking the guards and take their weapons. Most importantly, the water from the burst pipe short-circuits the electric floor, unleashing the prisoners' force. A group of inmates led by Cassian begins freeing other rooms and floors in the prison. Kino and Cassian overtake the command center and make the guards cut the power. The backup comes on, and Kino addresses the other prisoners over the comm system in a truly powerful speech. The entirety of Narkina 5 begins to escape, and each prisoner jumps one by one into the ocean. It comes time for Kino's turn when... It's a heartbreaking twist, where victory feels crushing in a way only this show can do. Back on Coruscant, Lonnie Young, a turncoat Imperial officer, puts on an earpiece and boards an elevator. He begins talking to Luthen, who immediately knows details about the officer's life. Young tells Luthen about Miro's investigation into Axis. Luthen tells Young to mislead Miro. Young also tells Luthen about the plot with the pilot. Luthen decides not to warn Krieger's faction about the incoming Imperial assault because it will reveal that they have a security leak, compromising Young's advantage. Young's elevator arrives, and he comes face to face with Luthen Rail. Young wants to stop being a double agent, but Luthen will not hear it. Young asks Luthen what he sacrificed, to which he replies, everything. The episode ends with Cassian and other prisoners reaching safety on land. The intrigue continues in episode 11, Daughter of Ferrix. Cassian and fellow prisoner Melshi hide from a TIE Reaper patrol. Over on Ferrix, Marva unfortunately passes away. B is despondent. Both rebels and Imperials watch her funeral procession. Back with Cassian, he attempts to steal a ship but gets caught in the trap of a local fisherman. They consider turning the two men back in, but they've been burned by the Empire as well and decide to let them escape off-world. Back on Coruscant, Vel tries to reach Luthen at his dealership. Marky refuses to connect her though, as it is outside of protocol. Vel reports about Marva's upcoming funeral. Later, Bix is asked for information on Anto Krieger. She still doesn't talk. Over with Monmouth, she attends Ladra's courtship ritual. I guess she's going through with the arranged marriage after all. She also confides in Vel that her financial movement has begun to ring alarms. But she says she has a plan. Over with Cyril, he receives news of Marva's death. He believes Cassian might show at the funeral. Cassian arrives on Niamos, where he retrieves a blaster and Kari's manifesto. Meanwhile, Luthen meets with Saw Gerrera. Saw intends to join Krieger's group, but Luthen warns him about the Imperials' knowledge. Saw is horrified that Luthen would sacrifice Krieger. He demands to know Luthen's spy, who he's protecting, and Luthen claims it's Tubes, one of Saw's bodyguards. There's a bit of a scuffle, but in the end, Saw reluctantly agrees to trust Luthen and let Krieger fall for the cause. Luthen calls Marky about Saw's loyalty, but stops the call when he gets stopped by an Imperial patrol. They start tractor beaming Luthen's ship, but he has his droid fight back. TIE fighters chase Luthen's ship, which he shoots down, and they jump to hyperspace. He escapes. Back with Andor, he calls his contact on Ferrix and learns of Marva's death. He decides to split up with Melshi. He gives him a blaster and they head their separate ways, a melancholic lead into the finale. The finale of Season 1, Rix Road, opens with Wilman, the son of the executed salvage yard owner, working on a mysterious device. Simultaneously, Miro arrives on Ferrix and Barrasso gets word from Zanwan, the transport manager, that Cassian returned to the planet as well. They decide to keep it a secret. On Coruscant, Monotha confronts her husband about his gambling problems, which he denies. He thinks Imperials are after him due to his wife's secret activities. Monothma's driver, who's been suspicious all season, listens to this conversation. On Ferrix, Vel and Chinta reunite. Chinta tells Vel they're under surveillance and that the Imperials plan on trapping Cassian. They intend to reach him first. Cassian wanders the streets of Ferrix and thinks of his adoptive father's last words.
People don't look down the way they should.
Cassian goes to Bix's scrapyard and is attacked by dogs, then learns from Pegla that Bix has been captured. Later, Cassian reads Kari's manifesto, and its ideas of organized resistance resonate deeply with him. Next, the always scheming Miro sets a trap by seeming to relax Imperial street patrols. They allow the Daughters of Ferrix, a social club that Marva led, to block off the street for her funeral. Next, Blevin joins a briefing from Portages, who reports that Krieger's team was killed. Miro, who's tuned in via comlink, is upset because they could have taken prisoners to interrogate for intelligence. He tells her it's her turn to finally capture Axis. Luthen arrives on Ferrix as well. Cassian meets with Brasso underground, who tells him that before Marva died, she had a message.
Tell him none of this is his fault.
He also tells Cassian that Bix is being held captive at the hotel. Cassian intends to rescue her during the funeral. Syril also arrives in disguise. Thel meets with Luthen, where he reveals a plan to assassinate Cassian. The funeral procession goes on, with multiple Imperials and rebels planted throughout the audience. From his hiding spot in an attic, Cassian spots Luthen in the crowd. Imperials begin to confront the procession. Cassian gets chased but runs into a sewer, which leads to the hotel. He holds up a cook and gets Bix's location. He frees her. At Marva's funeral, her message plays, and she explicitly tells the populace to take up arms against the Empire. The crowd reaches a boiling point, and they begin fighting with the stormtroopers. Miro gets caught in the chaos, while Willman throws what he was working on at the last episode's start, a dirty bomb. The stormtroopers begin opening fire. Chinta kills Korv as well. Miro is attacked by the crowd, but she's saved by none other than Syril, who hides her away. Pegla and Brasso prep a ship to get the hell off this planet. Cassian tells them to take Bix away. He says his goodbyes and heads back to the streets. Where is he going? Luthen makes to leave when Cassian confronts him. He throws Luthen a blaster and gives him a choice. Luthen officially welcomes Cassian Andor to the rebellion. But far off in the galaxy, the Death Star begins its reconstruction. Season 2 opens with 1 year later, which, you guessed it, is set a year after Season 1. This season as a whole utilizes time jumps, with each 3 episodes cutting to a new year, bridging the 4-year gap between Season 1 and Rogue One. We follow a mysterious figure who will be revealed soon as Naya through an Imperial hangar. She checks out a TIE fighter, then anything that's supposed to happen. Amina Rao, Kellen, the general store owner who's hiding the Ferrix gang, tells Brasso that the Imperials recently arrested undocumented immigrants on another farm. He lets them know he obtained work permits for a different block of the planet that they will need to travel to. We'll see how that works out. Over on Chandrila, Mon Mothma has a private word with Leda. Mon drops the act and tells her daughter the wedding doesn't matter and she should not go through with it, if it's not what she wants. Leda thinks she's insane and gets ready for the wedding instead. Due to custom, Mon Mothma walks Leda down the aisle, which isn't awkward or anything. The ceremony continues and the young couple are official. On Coruscant, Miro and Syril get ready for none other than the Syril's overbearing mother. She plays sweet, but the couple is uneasy as she's clearly adding some judgments. Elsewhere in Coruscant, Marky sends out a transmission and reaches none other than Andor. He tells her that he's been trapped for 2 days inside the TIE as his unit is compromised and he can't effectively fly the ship. He asks for Marky to contact Bix, but Marky reveals Mina Rao's frequency is blocked. He wants updates, but she doesn't have them. She tells him to stay put, but Cassian jumps to hyperspace instead. Back with Miro, the dinner with Cyril's mom, Edie, continues. She reveals Cyril's father left them both to explore the universe. Edie asks Miro about her family. She says they were criminals and she was raised by the state. Maybe that's why she's so loyal to the Empire. Later at dessert, Eerie starts coming down hard on her son and judges him for working off of Coruscant. He eventually has enough and storms out. When they're alone, Miro finally rips into Edie.
You want Syril in your life, you will think before you speak.
She even threatens to go after their Uncle Harlow if Edie doesn't stop. Syril overhears this in the next room, but when he re-emerges, they pretend everything's good. On Chandrila, the reception continues with lavish gifts abound. Koma speaks to Mon Mothma, and it's clear he's incredibly nervous still and that he is terrified of Luthen. Something is deafs up there, but before, everyone is distracted by the wedding's pomp. Back with Bix, Brasso tells B that they're leaving. They realize Willman left on a land speeder. He's off to say bye to his babe Bila. He gets to her, and during an embrace, she takes his blaster to ask him where the hell he's going. But the meeting gets crashed by Imperials, led by none other than that creep Kroll. They hide out. Kroll reaches Bix's home and demands food for his men. Brasso looks for Willman among the grain. He doesn't get spotted and sneaks back to the hideout. Bix contacts Cassian, and they speak briefly, but then Kroll reaches her. He questions Bix about why she's packing and doesn't buy her excuses. He claims to know she's here illegally, but can help her out. It's clear he's trying to sexually take advantage of her. At the general store, Brasso stages a fight with Kellen to cover for him. The Imperials promptly arrest Brasso. Over with Bix, Kroll makes a move and she hits him in the face. He continues to make advances, but Bix fights back. The sequence is intercut with a dance at Leda's wedding, drawing a sharp contrast between the opulence of those who benefit from the Empire and those who are oppressed by it. Kroll's driver hears the struggles and radios for backup. Back on Chandrila, Chinta, under Luthen's instruction, poses as Kolma's driver to take care of him, permanently. The risk was just too great. Back with Cassian, he arrives on the planet, loudly. Brasso takes the chance to escape while stormtroopers chase him. Andor provides aerial assistance. Bix and Woman realize who's flying the ship. He lands and approaches Brasso, but it's too late. Damn, that sucks. Cassian tells the survivors they gotta go, now. He flies them off to another planet. Episode 4, Ever Been to Ghorman, is set a year later. Bix and Cassian wake up next to each other. At least they made it out safe. Bix grabs a blaster and encounters, but it turns out to be a hallucination from her severe trauma.
You tried. He knows that.
Cassian asks what happened, but she's unwilling to divulge her past. She breaks down, and we zoom out to reveal the couple has made their home on Coruscant. On Ghorman, Cyril takes up residence. He walks the city streets, passes a protest, and goes to the Bureau of Standards office. He speaks to his mother via comlink, who rages at him for leaving Coruscant and Mira behind. She also digs into the Ghorman people as a whole. Cyril pushes back and says that's Imperial propaganda. Unbeknownst to either, 2 Ghorman rebels listen in, one of whom is Caro Rylance, a Ghorman official and leader of the resistance here. He loops his colleagues in about Cyril and his mother. They believe Cyril could be turned to become sympathetic to the Ghorman cause. Back on Coruscant, Bix and Cassian go shopping.
Fresh from UK, I'll find a good.
I need 3.
Okay, back to Ghorman. On Cyril's way out of the office, he encounters one of these rebels, Sam, disguised as a street vendor. Sam gives Cyril a spider figurine, which contains candy, and invites him to a town hall meeting. Later, they cook dinner and discuss Bix murdering Imperial officers during a previous mission. She feels guilt, but Cassian says it's a necessary cost of war. They're operating as a couple together, but it's clear they're both finding life on the run incredibly taxing. Elsewhere on Coruscant, Mira talks to Cyril, who's reported he's been contacted by the Ghorman Front rebels. He says he knows they're tapping his phone and searching his apartment, and he intends to infiltrate them. Mira decides to keep his actions from her superior. Later, she attends an ISB board meeting where Hart reports he has seized weapons from the Axis network. However, no real intelligence emerged. After the meeting, Mira meets with Hart and confirms that he's onto something. However, he does not want her involved.
You don't think I could be helpful?
I won't hesitate if I need it.
Over with Monmouthva, she meets with the Ghorman senator, Dasi Orin. They plead with her to take up the cause against laws that are targeting Ghorman. Later, she tries to rally another senator, but he's unwilling to tie himself to the targeted planet. He says voting against the Emperor will make him clamp down even harder. Elsewhere in Coruscant, Young, who was present for the ISB meeting earlier, visits the underworld to meet with Luthen. He reveals Mira has been running Ghorman secretly for the past year. Luthen needs more from Young. He needs info that will lead to an endgame for the rebellion. Back on Ghorman at the town hall, Ghorman reps discuss the Imperial clampdown. They get into a heated debate. Cyril attends and listens in the back, and Sam helps translate. He begins to integrate himself deeper undercover. After the meeting, Caro says Cyril is brave for having an Imperial job and attending. Cyril insists he's acting as an individual. Caro tries to ask Cyril what the Empire's plan is by annexing Ghorman, but Cyril says it's classified and he doesn't even know. Caro explains that 16 years ago, Tarkin killed 500 Ghormans, and it would be upsetting for an Imperial base to be built within eyesight of the memorial. Cyril expresses his sympathies, even though we know it's all an act. On Coruscant, Cassian meets with Luthen, who gives him a new assignment. Go to Ghorman and meet with Caro and find more about the Ghorman residents. Elsewhere on planet Dekar, Woman meets with none other than Saw and his partisans. Woman also demonstrates a machine to extract Rhydonian, an incredibly toxic substance that can be used for fuel. Saw orders Woman to stay with the partisans for an indefinite amount of time. Back on Coruscant, Cassian says goodbye to Bix. She waits it out alone and takes sleeping drops. Hopefully she can take it alone. This arc continues in episode 5. I Have Friends Everywhere starts with Luthen's plan for Ghorman in full motion. Cassian secures transport off-world and gets a new identity, Varian Sky, a fashion designer. On Ghorman, Cyril continues to play his game of feeding the Front wrong information through the bug, but one problem. The ISB has the office clear out.
We'll need everyone out immediately.
I'm afraid you'll have to wait. We're in the middle of an audit.
Back at Luthen's antique shop, Marky listens in on Davo, wonder what she's up to. The Ghorman rebels read over Cyril's previous file. They get intel on his old situation and dishonorable discharge. Caro thinks he is likely a turncoat. Caro encounters Cyril on the street, where Cyril relays his day of harsh interrogation. He tells Cyril he thinks the ISB installed its own listening device in his office. Caro asks Cyril for help in determining what is on the transports coming in, and what exactly the Empire is building. Back at the safe house, Bix is still paranoid, but luckily her visitor is just Luthen. It's a check-in visit where he reaffirms he needs Bix for some unknown purpose, and he discourages her from using the sleeping drops. She's miserable on Coruscant, but needs to hold out a little longer. Cyril heads to Coruscant, buys a souvenir spider from Sam, and secretly hands him a holochip. Back with Marky, Davo's assistant visits the antique shop over one of his vases being fake. I'm sure that will become important later. Over with the Ghorman rebels, they review the intelligence and find an inventory of Imperial shipments. However, some of the data is highly classified as military secrets. They need to find a way to access it. Elsewhere on Ghorman, Cassian gets settled. He notices the memorial for the Tarkin massacre and, after some finagling, gets the lowdown on it and some tragic personal details.
He was killed, saving me.
He can immediately perceive the distrust all Ghormans harbor against the Empire. Cyril arrives on Coruscant and visits Miro, who had him followed per ISB orders. Back on Ghorman at a cafe, Cassian is met by his contact Enza, Caro's daughter and active Ghorman rebel. Cassian gets a little mad at her as he intended to contact her first tomorrow instead of her reaching out first. He thinks she's careless, but sets a meeting with her tomorrow under the pretense of it being about fabric for his designs. Cassian meets Enza and Caro the next day. They get straight down to business. Cassian gives him a specialized transmitter crystal that is unlikely to be tracked. Caro tells Cassian he has an Imperial source, meaning Cyril, and Cassian tells him to be wary of trusting that. Caro also says he knows the Imperials are flying in weapons. Cassian deduces the Ghormans plan to rob these shipments to build up arms of their own. Sam, who is browsing the store, joins the conversation too. They make plans to meet again. On Coruscant, Cyril reports his knowledge of the Ghorman front. He can tell Miro and her superiors are planning something big, but he has no idea about specifics. Luthen discovers Dava's collection will be audited, which will reveal a bug Marky planted. That is not good. They're getting tangled in a web of lies, and the stress is clearly getting to both. Marky says they need to think about arrangements to evacuate if they're discovered. On Ghorman, the front tracks Imperial shipping routes. Back with Saw, Wilman completes his device, and Saw no longer needs his services. Saw kills a partisan who was encouraging him to take out Wilman, and it turns out he was transmitting to the Empire. They evacuate as they know the Empire will be alerted by his death. On Ghorman, Cassian tells Caro that the heist can be done, but he thinks the front is too inexperienced to escape successfully. Caro thinks Cassian lacks urgency and leaves him. The episode ends with Saw initiating Wilman. They breathe Rhydonium together, a smell Saw got familiar with at a work camp as a child. Wilman takes off his gas mask and officially becomes a partisan. Episode 6, What a Festive Evening, opens with Cassian giving his take on the Ghorman front to Luthen. They're not ready. Don't get involved. He also reports the construction of a building in the capital city of Palmo that is supposedly just offices, but everyone knows it has military purpose. Luthen has other ideas.
Think like a leader. Think about a planet like Ghorman in rebellion.
Cassian doesn't want to get involved. Afterwards, Luthen calls Marky and asks for another shipment to Ghorman. Cassian returns to Coruscant, where he meets Bix to find the house surprisingly spruced up. He updates her on Ghorman, and she tells about Luthen's surprise drop-in. Cassian is shocked that Luthen met her alone. Elsewhere on the planet, Mon Mothma and her husband are on their way to a banquet hosted by Davo. Later, Cassian goes to Luthen's antique shop and chews him out for seeing Bix. Luthen thinks Cassian is being ruled by emotions and not thinking of the cause, implying Bix will be needed. Cassian says he alone will deal with Luthen. At the ISB headquarters, Protagus meets with Young and Hart. He tells them our old friend Dr. Gorst is being assigned higher up in the Imperial organization. He tasks the two men with keeping an eye on Gorst. Back on Ghorman comes a reunion. Chinta and Vel are on Ghorman without the front's knowledge. They both reveal they only took the mission to be with each other. Can't even lie. That's pretty sweet. Hope they make it out alive. Miro meets privately with Protagus. She warns him of an upcoming attack on Ghorman. He thinks she's walking a fine line, and he reminds her to keep Cyril in the dark about their plans. Back at Ghorman, Vel and Chinta connect with the front. They plan the weapon truck robbery. Vel says take only what they need, but Sam wants to send a message. Vel tells them to follow his gosh darn orders. She runs into the same issue with her getaway driver, Drina. Maybe Cassian was right about this motley crew. Back with Cassian, things aren't looking good with Bix. She's paranoid and says the Empire will always find her. On Ghorman privately, Chinta is concerned about Drina's competence. Vel realizes Chinta is in more trouble than she let on, and they hold each other. Mon Mothma and her husband arrive at the banquet and meet none other than Princess Leia's adopted father.
Perrin? Vale, how are you?
I'm free.
Intercut with this party sequence, which sees multiple Imperials and uncover rebels tensely mingle, is the raid on the weapons transport. Vel and Chinta meet with the Ghormans as Miro supervises from a command center. Chinta and Vel plant explosives on the street but are watched by Cyril. At the party, Davo presents its gallery, and Mon Mothma and Luthen meet Erso and Kennick. Back at the raid, they spring the plan into action, stopping the truck and looting it. The mission seems to be going well, but little do they know, Cyril is getting it all on camera. At the party, Marky removes the listening device while strategically positioning Young to block her from the others. A civilian stumbles upon the raid when Sam stops him. The two get into a fight, and the stray shot hits Chinsa. Oh man, that's devastating. On their way out, Vel rightfully eviscerates Sam. Meanwhile, Dr. Gorst goes to the ISP headquarters and is met by none other than Bix. She gives him a taste of his own medicine. Let's jump another year forward to Episode 7, Messenger. The rebel base on Yavin is in the process of getting established. Woman arrives on the scene. Present elsewhere on the planet are Bix and Cassian. Woman meets them and explains that Luthen is wondering why he hasn't been contacted by Cassian. Cassian says he needs to stand with the other rebels instead of doing risky solo missions. He might have a point. Ghorman looks so much different than before. Soldiers patrol the empty streets and the Ghorman people continue to resist. Cassian wonders why Luthen even needs his services when Woman reveals the target, whom Luthen wants Andor to assassinate.
She's there in Ghorman. In the open, I've seen her.
Cassian won't hear it. He tries Bix next, who listens but doesn't say anything. Speaking of Miro, Portagas tells her they're sticking with the original plan of mining the planet and relocating its people. He also intends to send a crisis specialist, Captain Cade, to help on the assignment. Let's check in with Cyril. He meets with Miro and asks why he's not being looped in on the action on Ghorman. She stonewalls him and tells him to pack his bags. That's not ominous or anything. Mon Mothma meets with the Ghorman senator. She promises to further his cause in the Senate. Good luck with that. On Ghorman, the front is frustrated by their lack of progress against the Imperials. Kara reminds them of their national identity and they will do anything it takes to preserve that. On Yavin 4, Bix and Cassian go to see a Force healer. She immediately takes a big interest in Andor, who is skeptical from the jump. She touches Andor's blaster wound and gets emotional.
Thank you.
He leaves, but Bix stays back and asks the healer about Andor. She essentially says he is a messenger with a destination unknown and that maybe Bix is his intended destination. Later, Andor's wound is miraculously healed. Bix visits as he's examining the wound. She tells him that she has Force dreams and maybe the healer was onto something, which is why he got so upset. The next day, Cassie and Woman leave the planet on a personal trip, much to the annoyance of rebel leader General David Straven. They're, of course, going to Ghorman, where inexperienced Imperial peacekeepers arrive to help with the clampdown. Bix is visited by Vel, who says Andor needs discipline. Bix counters that he will be there when most needed. I have a feeling Bix is right. On Ghorman, Woman shows Cassian the devastation in the streets. He plans a spot to shoot Miro from. They exchange vows.
Ferrix.
That was Cyril who passed them at the end of that clip. Close call. After some finagling at the front desk, Cassian gets a hotel room that gives him a perfect view of Miro's offices. Next episode, Who Are You?, is one of the most action-packed and crucial installments of the series. It begins with Cassian armed up and ready to take out Miro. But, strangely, the Imperials begin moving the barricades inside their office. Miro has a call with Portagas. She thinks the Imperials erred in sending mining rigs, a clear sign of their intentions that will cause unrest. He says she wants the Ghormans to be aggressive, and she should focus her efforts on inciting them. The Ghorman front arms up, ready to take the plaza, now that the plaza appears to be clear. On Ghorman, a protest gradually starts to snowball. Kara observes all while realizing, as the famous Admiral Akbar once said, it's a trap. Enza insists this is the time to make the people's voices heard. As the protest gathers momentum, Cassian takes apart his rifle. On the streets, Kara gets into conflict with Cyril and blames him for the Imperials moving the mining equipment in. Cyril doesn't seem to know about it and pushes him away. On Cassian's way out of the hotel, he has a moment with a bellboy from the earlier episode.
Didn't look you in.
Cassian blends in with the crowd and begins staking out the scene. He gets eyes on Miro overlooking the plaza from a balcony. At the same time, Cyril storms into the Imperial office. On his way in, he hears a news reporter spinning the story to portray the Ghorman as instigating the unrest. Cyril is dropped off in a waiting room for other Imperial employees. 6 KX series droids sit menacingly, including K2 Erso, who's gonna be really important. In the plaza, stormtroopers take position. This situation is turning into a powder keg. The protest turns to song. The Ghormans sing their national anthem. In the office, Cyril confronts Miro, saying that she didn't tell him anything. He chokes her until she talks. She tells him the Empire's intentions of exploiting Ghorman and that she's known for years. Cyril, completely devastated, leaves her. The Imperials begin moving riot guards in, while Cyril slips into the crowd. The Empire escalates the situation with scary control. Miro gives the order for an Imperial sniper to fire into the crowd. It devolves into absolute chaos, with the Ghorman front and Imperials engaged in open combat on the street. Many civilians die, and familiar faces we've come to know on the Ghorman front take fire. Cassian lines up another shot of Miro, but she walks away too fast. Next, the Empire employs the KX series droids. One of them tosses Enzo like a ragdoll, killing her instantly. Zero can't believe his eyes as Cassian lines up his shot. The hotel bellboy throws a bomb from inside the building, killing multiple stormtroopers. Zero notices Andor and charges. The two fight as this season's long conflict boils over. It seems that Zero has the upper hand when… boom. Saved by Caro. Cassian reconnects with Willman on the streets. Willman wants to head back to find his lover Drina, but Cassian says they need to run now. One problem, they're being chased by a killer Imperial droid, but Sam comes with an assist. They take the knocked out droid away. On the transport, they tune into the radio to hear Drina broadcasting the true news of the Ghorman massacre. In private, Miro seems completely broken. The massacre is followed by an immediate dose of political intrigue. In the next episode, Welcome to the Rebellion, we open with the Ghorman senator being carted away by stormtroopers. He warns that the other senators will be next. Mon Mothma and Senator Organa witness this. She tells him that she intends to speak at the Senate and denounce the Empire once and for all.
We need an exit plan, and we need to make it now while we still have the time.
We have a plan.
Organa doesn't want to act because the rebel base isn't fully established on Yavin yet. He also tells Mon Mothma that a listening device was found in her office. They both prepare to be ready to leave at the drop of a hat. Elsewhere on Coruscant, Marquis briefs Cassian in the antique shop. If Mon Mothma speaks, they need to evacuate her. She makes Cassian a fake press pass so he can assume the identity of a reporter and get access to the politicians. Cassian, clearly rattled by all he's witnessed, says he's done after this. Cassian is dealing with some deep existential issues. Elsewhere, Mon Mothma's assistant discovers another listening device. She goes outside to practice her speech. Luthen meets her there, hidden in a cloak. He tells her Senator Organa's team has a rat and she will end up in prison if she leaves with him. She thinks Luthen is only protecting himself. He promises her a safe exit.
I'm sending someone I trust, someone I know I can trust.
Mon Mothma returns home and confronts her aide for secretly working with Luthen. He defends himself as trying to protect her, but she doesn't hear it and fires him. Cassian meets with Luthen, who's unsure if Mon Mothma will even give the speech. He tells Cassian that he doesn't intend to go to Yavin with them. Cassian thinks he needs to leave Coruscant as the Empire will eventually capture him. Luthen says he's prepared to sacrifice himself. Marquis returns with news that Mon Mothma fired her aide and that Organa's team is corrupt. Simultaneously, Mon's driver Cloris reports her movements to the ISB. Later, Cassian uses his press credentials to get into the Senate. At the same time, a trio of men working for Bail Organa plan to extract her in parallel. Over at the ISB headquarters, the Imperials discuss that they will not allow the dissenters to speak on the Senate floor. Before heading into the Senate chamber, Senator Organa gives Mothma instructions on where to meet her team after the session. As senators begin speaking as if Imperials were victims of Ghorman, Cassian gets into position, and Mon Mothma's aide, Simaj, introduces himself to him. Cassian follows. With the Organa gang, Beskha, one of the members we've seen in the trio earlier, is caught reporting to the Imperials by another member of her team. She takes out the witness. On the Senate floor, Senator Organa uses procedural rules to allow Mon Mothma to give her speech as Simag leads Cassian to Mon's escape pod. Mon Mothma's speech is beautifully written, topical, and puts the entire Empire on blast. The Imperials try to shut off the feed and discover someone has sabotaged it, and they can't. Until they do. Cassian meets Mon Mothma and tips her off with the code phrase. She's suspicious, but seems to buy it more when Cassian says he knows Vel. Cassian escorts her out of an elevator while Beskha is waiting. She draws a blaster but gets distracted. Cassian wastes her. Cassian gives Mon Mothma a brown coat and they slip out of the building. Cassian wastes Mon's spy driver on the way out too. She's shocked but has no other choice but to trust him. Just like that, they're out of there. Mon Mothma arrives at the safe house, which used to be Cassian's Coruscant apartment. Cassian and Simaj wait for her there. Willman, who now has a badly injured leg, and Drina are present too. While alone, Mon Mothma thanks Andor for saving her. He tells her to make it worth it. Later, the gang lands on Yavin. Willman gets rushed off for medical attention. Cassian reunites with Bix and tells her he's done with rebellion because he wants to be with her. She seems grateful to have him back, but she seems like she's hiding something. The next morning, Bix is gone. Cassian finds a recording where she says she had to leave because she can't live with herself knowing that she's the reason Cassian leaves the rebellion. Damn, incredibly tragic. The episode ends with the repurposed K2 Erso officially joining the team. I've got a feeling he's gonna come in handy. Episode 10, Make It Stop, is one of the most powerful installments, focusing on the relationship between Marky and Luthen. It's set another year later, bringing us dangerously close to A New Hope. We start on Luthen suiting up for a meeting. He meets Young at an abandoned walkway. Young tells him that Miro is planning an operation in Coruscant and Luthen may be at risk. He tells Luthen that he discovered a huge secret about the Empire and wants extraction for his family in exchange for the heads up. Young reveals that the Empire's energy project is a lie, and they are building a weapon, which we know as the Death Star. Luthen promises him safe passage. Wow, that's cold. Luthen meets with Marky and tells her about the weapon. She's familiar with the weapon's engineer, Galen Erso, someone we're gonna hear a lot more about in Rogue One. Luthen says he will destroy his antique shop's communications console to cover his tracks. He's in the process of doing so when he gets a visitor. Oh snap. They do some antique talk until Miro presents it with an Imperial NS9 Starpath unit, the device he bought from Andor all the way back in Season 1. They get into an ideological discussion. Luthen says the rebellion can't be stopped, and Miro says she's gonna torture him. Miro tries to arrest Luthen, but it's too late. He stabs himself with a rare dagger. Miro calls for a medic, and they transport him out. Let's check in with Marky. She stands in the safe house, Andor's old apartment, which has been totally emptied. She's here for a device, of which we don't know the purpose. We flash back to Luthen as an Imperial officer listening to civilians get slaughtered by other Imperials. Luthen seems to have nothing to believe in when he finds Marky hiding out. Back in the present, Marky heads to the hospital building holding Luthen. Inside the hospital, Miro clears the entire floor holding Luthen. Still, Marky sneaks into the building. Hart visits Miro to place her under arrest. Did not see that coming. Her campaign against Axis overreached the higher-ups' command one too many times. The past and present are intercut. Marky adopts a new identity with Luthen. At the same time, she attempts to reach Luthen's hospital room. In the past, Luthen and Marky witness a civilian execution. She asks when they can fight back. He says when the time is right. Crazy how this small interaction will snowball into the rebellion. In another flashback, we see them take concrete action against the Imperials. And their fate, living in the shadows for the greater good, is sealed. In the present, Marky blows up Imperial vehicles outside the hospital, creating a distraction. Marky finally reaches Luthen's room and takes him off life support, using the device we saw her take from the safe house. They share one last moment together as his life fades away. Episode 11, Who Else Knows, picks up with Hart surveying the destruction at the hospital. He commandeers the building, much to the annoyance of the hospital's director. Miro is interrogated by Director Krennic. She tries to deflect, making the questioning about Young's murder. But Krennic wants to know who she told about the Death Star. Krennic asks how Young had her clearances. She claims he stole them. Next, Krennic asks about Galen Erso. She claims she knows so much from intelligence briefings mistakenly forwarded to her. She admits she accessed the file to find Axis. She tells Krennic that Luthen's assistant had knowledge of the Death Star. At the Axis safe house, Marky is working on something. Back at the hospital, the ISB makes a crucial discovery.
How did she get up there?
But she's a nurse. There's a surgery entrance.
They're on Marky's trail. Marky builds a radio and reaches out. Over on Yavin, Woman's radio flickers from Marky's contact. He brings it to Cassian. Melshi, who ended up joining a faction of the rebellion, is now all in, and K2, who is extremely sassy. On Coruscant, Hart catches Krennic and Partagas up on Marky. He is authorized to catch her by any means necessary, with Partagas cooking up a cover story that she was a terrorist. Back with the good guys, they've realized the message they've received, which they still don't know who it's from, is a distress signal. Despite warnings, it could be a trap. Cassian hops on a U-Wing and is off. Hart visits the imprisoned Mira and updates her that Luthen is dead and Marky is on the run, and he's in charge of finding her. But he needs help, so he asks Mira what she would do. She tells him to look into radios with pulse signals, as they have been used on Ferrix and by other rebels. He gets off to it, but she says it's too late. Back at the temple on Yavin, General Draven hears about Cassian's trip and is pissed off. Woman defends Cassian, but Draven is not having it. Cassian, Melshi, and K2 land in Coruscant. Cassian activates the radio, and Marky gets the message loud and clear. At the same time, Hart picks up their transmission. The Imperials send a unit to the Axis safe house, while Cassian lands nearby. K2 stays on the ship. Cassian and Melshi head into the apartment. The Imperials black out communications, making a correspondence between the rescue party impossible. Even worse, an ISB shuttle lands right by their ship. Cassian and Melshi reach the safe house, expecting to find Luthen, but of course it's Marky. She fills them in that the Empire has been building a super weapon in secret, powered by Kyber crystals, and that Galen Erso is involved. She also breaks the news about Luthen. Rip to a real one. She doesn't want to go to Yavin 4, but Cassian insists. Outside, K2 comes into contact with the Imperials. He is a beast. Inside the safe house, Marky and Cassian debate what Luthen left behind. She says he owes it to them to put the pieces together on the super weapon and stop it. The episode ends right as the Imperials arrive at their door. The series finale, Jedha, Kyber, Erso concludes the TV side of the story. Cassian insists that if Marky comes to Yavin, it will be the best way to honor Luthen. He thinks the other rebels will be suspicious of her. Simultaneously, the Imperials on the scene will have a bit of a communications problem. Regardless, Hart's team proceeds with the raid. Melshi walks right into their view and gets the hell out of there. He warns Andor, who radios K2 to help. It's a standoff. The Imperials manage to stun Marky and Cassian. The situation evolves into chaos. K2 comes in clutch, and our heroes end up taking out the whole team. They regroup and get off the planet. Over on Yavin, which is looking a lot more like a full-fledged rebel base, the rebel leaders, including Mon Mothma, Senator Orgaga, and General Draven, confer with Saw via holoprojector. They tell Saw that his partisans' guerrilla warfare is undermining the organized rebel cause. He doesn't trust them at all and ends the call. Just then, an unknown ship arrives, which we know is carrying Cassian and company. As this was an unsanctioned fight, the rebels are on high alert. They land, and Marky is sent for medical attention. The rebel leaders meet with Cassian, and they ask why he broke protocol by going on an unsanctioned mission. He says he was trying to save Luthen. Cassian also fills them in that the Empire is making a super weapon in secret, and that it has to do with the destruction of Ghorman, Kyber crystal mining on Jedha, and the mysterious Galen Erso. The other leaders aren't sure of the info's validity, as they didn't know or trust Luthen. Cassian vouches for him with all he's got. Cassian wants to move on this intelligence ASAP, but Organa makes him wait it out another night to confer with more generals the next day. On the way out, Draven tells Andor that Saw is on Jedha. Next, Cassian meets with Marky and explains that the rebel leadership is still figuring out what to do. Next, Andor visits Wilman and breaks the news of Luthen's death. Later, Cassian and Vel share a toast to the fallen. We've seen so many sacrifices play out for the rebellion to reach this point. Vel asks Cassian if the info from Luthen is real. Cassian assures her there would be no rebellion without him, and that Marky would never lie about something as serious as a new Imperial weapon. Marky recovers Karis Namek's voiceover, reads from his manifesto. Far away, Partagas listens to it. He's visited by another Imperial officer, who says Partagas is under arrest. Wow, you can give your whole life to the Empire and they will still come for you. He doesn't let them take him alive. Back on Yavin, Vel tells Cassian that he should reconnect with Bix. He says he'll think of it when the war isn't so intense. Later, Draven meets with Andor and tells him about a contact on Khafre, who insists on only meeting with Cassian. Draven sees the connections that Cassian brought to light, but also thinks this could be a trap. Draven and Mon Mothma meets with Organa to convince him to have an open mind about Cassian. The next morning, Cassian wakes up from a dream of his sister on his home planet. Organa meets with Cassian one-on-one and tells him that he's approved to go to Khafre to meet the contact. He gives Andor a final blessing.
If I die fighting the Empire, I want to go down swinging.
Andor suits up and prepares for the mission. We check in with some other players throughout the series. Mon Mothma's husband boozes up in a limo. Amira is confined to an Imperial prison. On Cassian's way out, he shares a quick glance with a Force healer from earlier. He boards a U-Wing with K2 and they're off. Far away, Krennic watches the Death Star's construction. The final image is Bix back on Mina Rao, but she's not alone. She carries Cassian Andor's baby, continuing his legacy no matter what. And that leads us directly into Rogue One. Released almost a decade before Season 2 of Andor, Rogue One is a thrilling feature that bridges the gap between Andor and A New Hope. It plays as an epic finale to Andor because Rogue One ups the scale of action significantly and uses some of the same visual elements as the original trilogy. Oh, and if you somehow live under a rock or in another galaxy and haven't seen A New Hope, there are tons of spoilers incoming. You've been warned. Let's get into it. The majority of the action takes place directly after Andor, but first, we open with a flashback on Lamu. A little girl runs to her bearded father. This is our first look at the mysterious Galen Erso. His wife Lyra calls our old friend Saw and says the Empire has found them. Uh-oh. Galen has a tender moment with his daughter Jyn and sends her off with her mother. The Imperial invaders are led by none other than Krennic. He wants to bring Erso to complete work on the Death Star. Lyra won't let that happen. She pulls a blaster on Krennic. He gives a devastating order. Jin makes a run for it and finds a hiding spot away from the troopers. Saw eventually comes by to take her in. And we're back to the present. 15 years later, Jin is now a prisoner of an Imperial labor camp. We'll get back to her soon. But for now, we cut to Cassian, who meets the informant on Kafrene. He learns of the Death Star's construction and Galen's involvement in its design. Stormtroopers crash this meeting and Cassian shows what he can do with a blaster. Body Rock, a cargo pilot who recently defected from the Empire, lands on the moon Jedha with an important message for Saw. We'll check back on him later. At the labor camp, Jin is in transit when the ship's door blows straight off. It's the rebels. She fights them off, but is stopped swiftly by K2. She's brought to Yavin 4. Mon Mothma introduces her to Andor. They want to enlist Jin to find her father, whom she hasn't seen since that fateful day 15 years ago. They also want her to connect them back to Saw, who took care of Jin for years and has been fighting the Empire on his own. She's on board. Help them find her father for her freedom. Secretly, Cassian is ordered to kill Galen instead of extracting him. Oh man, those are some high stakes. Jin, Cassian, and K2 suit up and head to Jedha, where the Imperials have been drilling for Kyber crystals that will power the Death Star. Meanwhile, Saw, who is much more haggard from inhaling rhydonium, meets with Body, who delivers him a hologram recording. We cut to a very familiar setting. Yep, we're on a Star Destroyer outside the Death Star. Krennic meets up with a familiar face from the old trilogy. Krennic reports directly to Tarkin, who's been brought back from the dead through the magic of Disney CGI. He learns of Body's defection and is not happy at all. He says they need to test the weapon on Jedha to demonstrate its power and eliminate Body. Jin and the gang arrive on Jedha. K2 stays with the ship while Cassian and Jin head to find Cassian's contact. Elsewhere, Body is interrogated by Saw through this weird alien that's creepier than anything we've seen so far. Cassian and Jin search for their contact and encounter Chira Imwe, a blind, Force-sensitive warrior who's preaching on the street. Cassian tells her Chira is a former protector of the Kyber crystals. Stormtroopers roll in. Cassian and Jin try to keep a low profile, but Saw's army attacks. K2 arrives on the scene too for some much-needed support. It appears the trio has the upper hand when a new battalion of stormtroopers surround them, but another ally comes to aid.
Nothing for all this, as the Force wills it.
Even without vision and a lightsaber, the power of the Force alone makes Chirrut much stronger than men with blasters. A second wave comes when his friend Baze Malbus guns them down. This is becoming a lethal team. Saw's men swoop in next. Jin drops her last name and they agree to take them to their leader. Cassian, Baze, and Chirrut are imprisoned while Jin meets with Saw. He's thrilled to see her, but she claims to have been abandoned by him. She said it was for her safety. Saw tells her he thinks Body's message is a trap. She insists she just wants to find Galen. Saw questions about how she feels about the rebel cause, and Jin is dismissive. Saw says he has something to show her. Over on the Death Star, Tarkin pressures Krennic into striking using the Death Star's weapons. On Jedha, Cassian begins talking to Body, who is held in a separate cell. He asks about Galen. Over with Jin, Saw fires up the hologram. It's a message from Galen, where he says he was forced into helping the Empire. He also reveals he included a glaring weakness in the Death Star's design which can be exploited. And the plans for the weapon are located on a base on planet Scarif. This explains why Luke's one shot blows it up immediately in A New Hope, solving a decades-old question as to why a shutdown existed on the ship in the first place. Just then, the Death Star's laser strikes Jedha City and obliterates it. The prisoners flee. Cassian makes to find Jin. He reaches her and says he knows where her father is. As the rebels' hideout crumbles, our team escapes. Saw chooses to stay behind and fight until his dying breath. It's a close call, but the team, made up of Cassian, K2, Jin, Body, Baze, and Chirrut, fly away amongst the debris as Saw's hideout crumbles around him. They jump to hyperspace just in time. From the Death Star, Krennic and tons of Imperial higher-ups survey the damage. Tarkin congratulates him, then says he will take control of the Death Star due to the intelligence leak from Erso. Wow, what a great manager. Krennic decides to deal with Erso personally. He heads to Edu, which is also where our friends Jin and Cassian are going. Body tells Jin he knew her father. He thinks they're too late, but Jin relays what she heard from the message. One huge problem. It got destroyed in the chaos and there's nothing to back up Jin's claims. Still, the team believes her on a gut level. Cassian doesn't want to tell the Rebel Alliance with no backup, so they head to Eadu without knowledge of headquarters. They reach Eadu and don't have an exactly graceful landing. Body leads the group into an Imperial research facility and they go full stealth mode. Cassian heads off on his own. Krennic is there as well, checking in with Galen. From afar, they sight Galen. Cassian lines Galen up in his sniper sights, but sees something odd. Krennic is threatening Galen's men. He forces Galen to admit he was behind the leak. Cassian is about to take a shot when he lowers his weapon. Just then, the rebels fly in and attack the facility. Krennic executes Galen's team. Jyn reveals herself to Galen, but it's too late. He gets fatally wounded in the crossfire. They share one more moment together before he fades away. The main team makes it off the planet just in time. On the ship, Jyn confronts Cassian for almost shooting her dead. He explains he had orders and he believes in the rebellion's cause, in a way that it's clear hasn't sunk in for Jyn yet. Next, we visit another legendary location from the prequel, Mustafar, home of where Anakin became Vader. Like any totally normal, well-adjusted supervillain, Darth Vader lives in what looks like Dracula's castle in space. Krennic reports to the Dark Lord himself. Vader chastises him for not being able to keep the Death Star secret and his handling of Jedha. Krennic defends himself, and Vader puts him in place with a force choke and a one-liner classic Darth.
On your aspirations, Director.
Back on Yavin 4, Cassian and his crew report to Mon Mothma. The Alliance debates whether they can trust Galen's message. Jyn insists that acting to get the Death Star plans to find the weakness is crucial for the survival of the rebellion. That night, she rallies Cassian, her main group, and a small group of soldiers. They depart for Scarif. On their way out, Body gets asked what the group's call sign is, and he comes up with Rogue One. Alright, let's see what these scoundrels can do. They reach Scarif and get let in due to Body's knowledge of the code from where he was in the Empire. Jyn gives a motivational speech to the team with Cassian by her side. Jyn and Cassian plan on infiltrating the base while the rest of the crew creates a diversion. Rogue One's ship lands, and Jyn and Cassian take out the inspection team and steal their uniforms as disguises, in another fun homage to A New Hope. K2 pretends to follow his original programming and infiltrates deep into the base. The others begin setting traps and stealthily take out stormtroopers to cause maximum chaos. Cassian and Jyn now disguise themselves as Imperial officers in another fun homage to Luke and Han's disguises in A New Hope. They give the go-ahead for the others to attack. The rebels announce themselves loudly. Krennic sees this and sends men to address it immediately, clearing out the base for Jyn, Cassian, and K2. Tarkin gets word of the attack and sends a messenger to tell Vader. Mon finds out as well and decides to send backup. Oh, hey C-3PO and R2. The rebels keep the heat up as K2 searches the databank for the Death Star's plans. The Empire is giving all they've got, including AT-ACTs. On the rebel side, via Archival footage, the original actor for Red Leader appears to lend aerial support along with his team. They showdown outside of the Star Destroyer. One issue: the Empire deployed a shield over the planet protecting any ship from leaving. As Jyn and Cassian search the databank, stormtroopers arrive and confront K2. He fights them off at first, but gets badly wounded. Jyn locates the plans under her father's codename, Stardust. K2 keeps fighting outside, but there are just too many. He sets up an escape for the others and dies, ending the run of an absolute goat. Cassian and Jyn climb up the databank tower to reach the relevant file as the battle rages outside the base. She grabs it just as Krennic enters and starts shooting. Outside the base, the shield wall is still active, and Rogue One is pinned down. Chirrut repeats his mantra, "I am one with the Force, and the Force is one with me," as he walks through the gunfire to turn on a device to allow communications to the rebel fleet. At the same time, Body radios the rebel fleet. Cassian holds off Krennic so Jyn can escape, but he can only last so long. If you were wondering why these characters aren't in the original trilogy, now you know. Rest in peace to one of the most crucial figures of the rebellion. Chirrut dies from his injuries next, making Rogue One a pretty slim team. Body's message gets through to the rebel fleet that they need to deactivate the planetary shields. Then, Body gets killed by a grenade. When will the carnage stop? Hint, not anytime soon. Baze, the last man standing outside of Jyn, repeats Chirrut's mantra as he mows down stormtroopers. Meanwhile, Jyn maneuvers outside of the tower. She attempts to broadcast the Death Star plans, and just in time, 2 Star Destroyers collide with the shield gate and bring it down. She stumbles to upload the plans, but is stopped by Krennic. He asks who she is, and she reveals herself as an Erso. He goes to shoot her. Not so fast. Our boy Andor has still got it. Jyn transmits the plans just as the Death Star fires on the base, killing them both. Their sacrifice ensured the success of the rebellion. The rebels escape with the plans, but they get one terrifying visitor on their ship. Vader mows down an entire room, but the plans are passed off just in time. They escape on Tantive 4, the ship from the start of A New Hope. The film ends as the plans reach Princess Leia and the original trilogy has been set up. So, what do we think? Is the story better experienced with Rogue One at the beginning or ending? And what will happen with Andor's kid? Something tells me he's not showing up in The Mandalorian. Let me know what you think.